My guest today is Brother Obadiyah Israel. He is founder of Israelite Heritage, a Chicago-based organization that teaches alternatives to popular biblical history, specifically the history of the tribes of Israel. He is a writer, philosopher, and biblical scholar. Brother Obadiyah Israel, welcome to Pathways to the Sacred.
Thank you, Josh.
It's good to have you on. Who are the descendants of the ancient Israelites?
Very good question. According to the historical and archaeological record, we can trace the direct descendants of the biblical Israelites to a people in the Western Hemisphere that got here during what's called the transatlantic slave trade and are today known as blacks, African Americans, coloreds, and so forth and so on. We have not only the evidence, we'd have the scriptural backing, which is the foundation. We have, as I mentioned, the archaeological record along with historical information that proves that the so-called African Americans are direct descendants of the biblical Israelites.
Your website is careful to point out, though, that not all black-skinned people are the descendants of the ancient Israelites, though.
Absolutely. See, that's a point that needs to be understood, is that mankind was not, in the ancient times, was not separated according to skin color, but according to his nationality, according to his nation. Being separated according to your skin color is a new philosophy that is probably only 400 years old, and it's not a coincidence that that's around the same time that the transatlantic slave trade started.
Sure.
So the two go hand in hand. So when we look into the scripture, we see that the Egyptians, we can show and prove that they were a black-skinned people. We can show and prove that the Ethiopians were a black-skinned people, but they were not Israelites. They were separate. And so the Israelites was based on nationhood, nationality, not skin color, but it just happened so that these were a black-skinned people.
What are the biblical characteristics of the nation of Israel?
Very good, Josh. The characteristics of the Israelite nation, because we have to understand first that the Israelites made a covenant with the Most High. A covenant is a contract. And the Israelites agreed that they would do thus and such for the Most High. Well, he said that if you keep my laws, my statutes, my judgments, and if you make this part of your lifestyle, make this your life, then I will bless you. You will be the mighty, righteous nation. In fact, Israel would have been 100 times greater than what the United States is today had they stayed on the path that the Most High put forth for them. This information can be found in the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verses 5 through verse 10, and also Exodus chapter 24, where the Most High makes his covenant with the children of Israel. Now, he put in this covenant, he said, if you do not listen to me, if you do be disobedient, which the Israelites were and still are to this day, he said that he would put curses upon them. These curses are in the form of what we can call a punishment for our day. And so when we look into the book of Deuteronomy chapter 28 and the biblical book of Leviticus chapter 26, we see the outline of what these curses are. The Most High says in Deuteronomy 28 verses 45 and 46, he makes it plain that these curses are to be upon the children of Israel as a sign and a wonder. A sign is an indicator. So they are to indicate that whoever is suffering from these curses in this manner that they're laid out are direct descendants of the children of Israel. He goes on in verse 46 to say, they shall be upon you and upon your descendants forever. So when we look at the curses and we see that the children of Israel has been disobedient, that was the reason for the Messiah to come, to redirect them. And so we're seeing that they're still not keeping that covenant that they made with the Most High. So now they are a cursed people. And the characteristics of this Israelite nation is that they are cursed. And when we look at what the curses say, one of the curses in particular, you shall be taken into slavery in ships and be sold unto your enemies for male and female slaves. We know that happened to the so-called black people that came into the Western Hemisphere. He said that your children should be taken away and given to other people. We know that happened during the time of slavery, but right now it's still continuing in what's called the foster care system or the child welfare system, where in some states 80 to 90% of the children in that system are black or African American children. And not only are they being taken from their homes, but they are being given to Northern Europeans and Canadians. In fact, it's so easy for those people to adopt African American children from the United States. That was a program on the local Fox news station here, back in, I think, 2001. And the program was called The Forgotten Children. And in this program, they put that information out that it is easy for others to adopt these African-American children. And so it's just going in line with prophecy. But that's the characteristics of the Israelite nation right now, is that they will be a downtrodden people that are on the bottom in every society that they are in. They would not be they would be a people that is without a homeland. They would be a people without an identity. Jeremiah chapter 17 verse 4, the Most High makes it plain. He said, because of his anger against Israel, he said, I will cause your heritage to pass before you. And so when we look at that, and then he goes on to say that you shall be, he said that the Israelites shall be strangers. I mean, they shall be slaves in their enemy's land during this time when their heritage passed before them. So when we look at that, and that's one of the characteristics of Israel, is that they will have a lost identity, that identity will be stripped away from them. Now, we know from history, any good book on American history, especially the slave history, will tell you that when the slave came to this region, to this part of the world, one of the first things that was done to him was a process called the seasoning process. And by this, what they mean by seasoning is that they would rip our names, they would take away our whatever history we knew, whatever language we spoke, we were forbidden to practice that and keep that. And so when we look at Jeremiah 17:4, saying your heritage shall pass away from you, that he should take it away, this is when that process happened. That's why we are the only people in the Americas that it's like every 10 to 20 years, every couple of decades, our nationality changed. We were once Negroes, we were once coloreds, we were once blacks, African-American, Afro-American. No one else has experienced this but us. When Chinese people came here 400 years ago, they remain Chinese to this very day.
Right.
When German people come here, they remain German to this very day. We are the only people that our nationality continue to change because our original history, our original nationality was stripped away from us. So once that was done, now you can call us whatever you want.
You make an excellent point that there was a very deliberate and methodical stripping away. It's not just that people were brought over here and then had to assimilate. It was a very methodical and very deliberate stripping away of every aspect of an individual's identity and culture.
Yeah.
And that's something that is very interesting for me, because I can personally trace my ancestry back to medieval France, and it's very important for me to be mindful of that, because there are a lot of people who can't trace their history back 100 years,
right?
And that's something that I'm sure weighs on the identity of the whole people.
Right, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that the Most High, because he knew these things, because he knows things in advance, but that's one of the reasons that he said in Deuteronomy 28:46 that these curses shall be a sign and a wonder. They shall be a sign and indicator for you of who you are, because he tells us within these curses that all these things are going to happen to us, the stripping away of our identity and so forth. So he said the curses is what you must look for. And I've noticed that with many scholars today, as they go around the world, and they're right now we seem to be in a frenzy of lost tribe history, lost tribe myth, and they're going everywhere and they're looking for the lost tribe. They're here, they're there, and one of the things that they're looking for is that they're looking for a certain head shape, they're looking for a certain nose, even a certain practice, but they never ever look into the Bible and look into the scriptures and find the curses, where the Most High said that this is how you identify my people in the last days.
Why would God impose these sufferings?
We have to look at it from the standpoint of a father discipline his children. Although the curses, when he put the curses down, and we can see that some of the things that has happened to us as a people, the enemy has gone overboard, has went past what the Most High has called for. And that comes in from an inspiration from the adversary, because the adversary hates the children of Israel with a passion. And so when we look at these things, because he warned us, see, if you have a warning beforehand. The smart people will take the warning and take heed to the warning. For instance, I never been to prison. I never been to jail because I know if you break the laws of this land, you become a criminal, and criminals go to jail. So I know beforehand not to break the laws of the land because I don't want to go to jail. So if you have a warning that thus and thus is going to happen to you, then you must take heed to that warning. And so with the children of Israel, we were so disobedient that the Most High's anger had to come down upon us. He does not take pleasure in have to discipline his children like this. Even a parent, when we look at the perspective from the eyes of a parent, even a parent, there's a point where the parent may have to cut the child off, may have to disown the child because the child is so disobedient and the child has become a problem. Now with the children of Israel, he has allowed certain things to happen, but he has not cut the nation off. And he has not done away fully with his people. This was a point that the Apostle Paul made in the book of Romans, chapter 11, and it's also in Jeremiah, chapter 31, where the Most High is stating that he has not cast off his people Israel, although they are going through the things that they're going through right now, but he has not cast them off, and there's a greater reward for those who come back to him. Not all of the children of Israel will be saved, but the ones that do come back to him will have a chance at salvation.
Is there any biblical or scriptural basis that explains why the nation of Israel was disobedient to God's covenant?
Well, one of the key scriptures is, I think it's in the book of Samuel, where it speaks about this is when the Most High Yah is choosing the king over Israel, because the children of Israel told Samuel the prophet, they said that we no longer want, we want the Most High over us, but we want a king like the nations want a king. I mean, like the nations have a king, so we want a flesh king where we can see this king on the throne, where we can look at him just like the nations look at their king. So from that, we get the understanding that one of the things that the children of Israel, one of their greatest downfalls was that they wanted to be like the nations. They wanted integrations, just like we were in the 60s. We were fighting for integration instead of having our separate peace, because the Most High said, I have separated you from all the nations because I want to instill my laws, my commandments, my statutes in you, and I want you to be an example for all the world to see. And so all the world will look at you and see how mighty and great you are, then they will come flowing to you, and you give them over to me. So that was the plan. But Israel has always been a people that has wanted to be like the nation, and that was the downfall. And when we read in the book of Samuel and we see when King Saul or King Shaul, this began the Israelites wanting to be as they saw their neighbors, the heathens, roundabout. Now the title heathen, we must not take it out of context and must keep it in the context that is mentioned in the biblical sense, and it just means nations. The surrounding nations the nations that surrounded the nation of Israel, they were called heathen.
The people of the hearth. The people of the hearth. Right.
So it's not a term of derogatory, as we know it today. It just means, the people that were around the nations. But that was the primary cause of our disobedience, that we wanted to be like the nations, and the nations were wicked, and we were chosen so we can be different from the nations, so we can teach the nations the right way to walk, the right way to worship the Most High. So that began the children of Israel's downfall.